All right, so the main thing I want to get across my first thing here is I don't need to use any of these PowerPoints. So the fact of the matter is it may just be that we have questions. I mean, have to think about it. Why did my good plant go bad? What's wrong with my plant? Why is my plant not growing? Really, I mean, those are really kind of specific things that you want to know about a plant that didn't work from you. Your tomatoes started, you get less and less and less and less yield every year, and you're worried, why is that true? And the answer might very well be that the trees that were small in the old days are bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's more and more shade. And what happens with tomatoes is, for example, that they produce wonderful foliage under low light conditions, but they don't produce as many flowers and fruit. So, you know, those are kind of specific questions that the chances are 1 in a million, if that's your problem, that I'll mention it. So I have a few basic things that I may go in and out on every now and then, if, you know, once you stop asking questions. But we could just end up not having any of my PowerPoint. I mean, and that would be okay with me. So the question thing might be the best thing. So the first question, I get the first question. And the first question is, who sang the song 96 Tears? Nice organ. 96 tears, too many teardrops. Now I know that some people are just not answering because they say, oh, this will show how old I am.
Question mark in the mysterious.
All right, he's got it right. Question mark in the mysterious, and that was the whole point of it. And so he's wearing a green shirt. And such that the ultimate Skunks cookies. So there's all kinds of prizes tonight. Question mark in the mysterious. Pretty close to a one-hit wonder.
Yes, very close.
And you know, you have Shakespeare in Nature's Infinite Book of Secrecy, a little I can read. In Nature's Infinite Book of Secrecy, a little I can read. And gardeners and horticultural people and master gardeners and people that deal with nature are the best at understanding that that's the way it is. In Nature's Infinite Book of Secrecy, only a little can I read. There are no real bona fide know-it-alls when you deal with nature. I mean, you might act like you know it all, but you don't. Now, the thing that I like about that is that that means, and this is a freeing thing, it's not necessarily what we've seen in this political year, but it is a freeing thing to realize that every single one of us, and to me this is incontrovertible, every single one of us is ignorant of almost everything. Isn't that kind of cool to realize? We're ignorant of almost everything. And so that's, we learn, we continue to learn. And it's the beauty of enjoying nature and being a gardener is you learn forever. You're never going to say, well, I know all about it now, and I don't need to know anything more. That's just not the way, really, that nature works. So, question marks in the mysterious. Shall we start with some questions? Oh, come on. You really want to look at my slides? What's wrong with my plants?
How do you become a master gardener?
How do you become a master gardener? Well, master gardening is one of the most fantastic programs that Ohio State University has. So in I'm not sure, 73 or 74 of the counties have master gardeners. And what you do, and I'm gonna ask for some contributions from people here in Richland County in a second, but basically the idea behind it is that it's a program of Ohio State University Extension, and it's 40 to 60 hours of training where you come and you hear, you know, I'll come in, Joe Boggs will come in and talk about entomology, somebody will come in and talk about fruit production, somebody will come in and talk about lawn. So you get that training period, and then you give, you know, you pay for it because it's quite an expensive thing. You have a wonderful master gardener manual, all this kind of different stuff. And you have then a certain number of hours that you then give back in terms of volunteering to the community. And in every county it's a little different. Some counties it's the answer line in the extension office. In some counties they broaden it out tremendously to helping people at hospices, all kinds of different ways that you give back in terms of that And the thing is, and this is really true in a lot of states, it's kind of, we'll have regional training, or we'll have, training that just exists in regional ways, or online training. In Ohio, we've really held the line. Pam Bennett is the statewide coordinator. In Ohio, we really held the line on, it's all about that unit, that it's a big social thing, and it's a big energy thing. And we want to have live performances by teachers, and we want to have live performances by students as they're all learning together and doing projects together. So we really have a tendency to not do anything in a kind of very much of a regional effort unless we have to. So it really is every week you get together and have this program for like 10 weeks, learning all this stuff from people and recognizing that infinite book of secrecy. So, who is the person in Richland County to whom you would make the initial inquiry as to when the next class is coming? That I don't know. So when other people come back from other locations here, we'll try to find out how you actually initiate the process, when their next class is going to be trained, and all that kind of stuff. Because I don't know anything about that part. So I'm kind of a statewide specialist. So I just don't know. Oh, you're telling me something. You have a flyer for Master Gardening in Richland County. I will tell you that you become Master Gardeners for life. One of the things we make sure that we do is we publish your home phone numbers, your cell numbers, and you will get calls at 3, 4 in the morning, and that's the call. What's wrong with my plant? You're a Master Gardener, you tell me. Not really, but the point here is, and here's a big lesson. Number one lesson for a Master Gardener: you will never master gardening. That is such a cool thing. You'll never master gardening. But collectively, in every single Master Gardening class you have, there's just so much that one person knows that other people don't know, that you grow a lot from it. So it's a cool thing. So good question, and I'm going to give you this. Hey, by the way, is a strawberry a berry?
No.
No, so what is it?
Edible.
It's edible. That's very, see, he deserved that. So it's edible. Somebody taught me this the other day. I was always kind of, so they're compound fruits, and what you have here is actually you're eating the receptacle. And you know those little things on the outside that look like seeds? Those are fruits. Those are the actual fruits of the strawberry plant. And so a banana, believe it or not, is a fleshy, from a single carpel. Banana is a berry. Strawberries are not berries. Now raspberries are berries. What family? So here's the kind of stuff you'll learn. This is important relative to what's wrong with my plant. Strawberries are in what family? Think of the flower. The what? The Rosaceae family. So here's an interesting fact. In our world of names, which are kind of important. I mean, some people say, oh, just let me get in the dirt. I don't want to know this name stuff. But we do have this Latin as a language does that can be first we killed the Romans, now it's killing me kind of stuff. But we have this thing. A genus is a group of related species. So a genus could be, Acer. So Acer platanoides is the Norway maple. Acer saccharum is the sugar maple. Acer rubrum is the red maple. So a genus is a group of related species. A family, and there's a point to my thing here. A family, I taught this today to my class in Columbus. A family is a group of related genuses, which we call genera. That's just the plural for genus. So the family, and here I'm going to try to prove to you in a minute that the family thing matters, and it relates to just what we have up there. So a family is a group of related genera. So for example, strawberry is in the genus Fragaria. Rubus is the genus for raspberries and blackberries. The genus for apples, see these people that know all this stuff? Apples are in the genus Malus. Pears are in the genus Pyrus. Mountain ashes are in the genus Sorbus. Those are all genera in the Rosaceae. Now here's an interesting thing. Bacterial fire blight. That's a bacterium that causes a disease that's really a big problem. It only occurs on genera in the Rosaceae. So it causes a shoots to curl over like that. It's called shepherd's crooking. if you see that symptom, and you know, other things can cause that symptom, if you see that on a genus that's in the Rosaceae, you can say, aha, that's real suggestive that that's bacterial fire blight. Then you start thinking about what you can or cannot do. Bacterial fire blight wiped out the pear industry in the state of Ohio. I mean, it's not that you can't grow pears, but in terms of having a commercial fruiting pear industry, fire blight wiped it out in the early 1900s. Because the key environmental condition for fire blight, in addition, you have to have the pathogen presence, the bacterium. You have to have a susceptible host. The host has to be one of those genera in the Rosaceae. And you have to have an environment conducive to disease. And the environment conducive to disease for fire blight is warm, wet weather during bloom. And Ohio has too many of those years, not every year, above 63 degrees for a significant number of hours above, with it being wet. Ohio has too many of those compared to the Pacific Northwest, which is where the pear industry for the most part went. In the Pacific Northwest, where they grow pears, is either along the coast where it's cool and wet when there's bloom, or past the rain shadow. So the rain falls out in the mountains, like at Mount Hood, and then the Hood River Valley, which is on the other side of that, is dry and warm. Dry and warm, cool and wet most years compared to too many years we have warm and wet. So, bacterial fire blight occurs only in the rose family. Okay, what about emerald ash borer? What does it occur on? That's an insect. Ashes, very good. And ashes are in the genus Fraxinus. And what family are they in? The olive family. Oleaceae. And so far, it only occurs on Fraxinus and one other plant, Chionanthus, which genetically is incredibly closely related, even though it doesn't look like it. But the number of gene pairs that line up, very related to ash in the genus Fraxinus. So let's think about what I just said here for a minute. Fraxinus is in the Oleaceae. The emerald ash borer only gets on Fraxinus, and one closely related plant genetically in that same family, the Oleaceae, the olive family. All these plant families end in ACEAE. And we said, oh, wait, the mountain ash. Mountain ash is in the Rosaceae. It gets fire blight, and it does. So there's this thing about names that comes up all the time. Mountain ashes are in no way closely related to true ashes in the genus Fraxinus. Green ash, black ash, blue ash, pumpkin ash, the things that are being killed by emerald ash borer. Bacterial fire blight occurs only on these genera in the Rosaceae. Emerald ash borer only occurs on this one genus and one slightly, very closely related genus in the Oleaceae. Knowing those host ranges really helps you understand what's occurring. We don't have to worry. However, we had people who cut down mountain ashes in anticipation of emerald ash borer moving into the area. Because they said, ashes, I hear about this, I don't want to have to treat with insecticide, I don't want to be just coming here, it's going to kill the ashes, what am I going to do? And I think I'll just cut it down. Mountain ashes aren't related to green ashes and the true ashes in the genus Fraxinus. So you might say, well, who cares? Well, that's the point. That's what a master gardener does. Somebody calls up and says, do I have to worry about emerald ash borer on a mountain ash? I love this tree. No, it's in the rose family. It's not a true ash. It won't be infested by the emerald ash borer. So names are really critical. And you might say, well, who are these idiots that name mountain ash an ash if it's not really a true ash? Well, it's just the way it goes. It's a long time ago, and in fact, it's just a name that's out there. Common names, so that's why the Latin names can be useful, even though, again, it can be frustrating. That's why those names can be useful to sort that out, yes?
The blight with chestnut.
Okay, so a great question. You may or may not have heard it. So the blight that took the chestnut years ago, and they're starting to reintroduce some chestnuts that are grafted and that have some genetic resistance to chestnut blight. And are we starting to see that with ashes? Okay, so very good question. And part of the answer is going to relate to something that's very close to you, namely, where is the Ohio Agricultural Research and Development Center? Worcester, Ohio, so not very far away. So here's a little background. Chestnut blight was another one of these invasive organisms from another part of the world. And there's where we really run into trouble, when worlds collide. The fact of the matter is that emerald ash borer, for example, that insect is native to Asia. And there's ashes in Asia. They're just not very closely related. They're in the same genus, Infraxinus, but they're different genetically than our North American ashes. The ashes in Asia have pretty good resistance to emerald ash borer because they've been around it longer. And basically, over time, natural selection shows you that, you know, something that you're able to do over time, over thousands, over millions of generations, gives you an edge. A mutation where the plant, for example, produces a chemical that is helpful in helping it resist the insect. So the problem was that when this insect got introduced to North America through the port of Detroit in some pallets, in some wood in the pallets, the problem is that our North American ashes had no experience, no genetic resistance, no thousands or millions of generations where they were challenged, and so something that happened to have a mutation survived better. Same thing with Dutch elm disease, so you can go on and on and on. The same thing with chestnut blight. So Chinese chestnuts are resistant, for example, to chestnut blight because we know that that fungus originated there. So, interesting, amazing thing. All of you are so young that you don't have any memory of this, but I was born in 1870. And in my youth, 25% of the trees in the Appalachian area, the deciduous trees, hardwood trees, were chestnuts. 50% of the biomass, the tree biomass that's estimated of Great Smokies Mountain National Park were American chestnut. So it's really an unbelievable thing. I mean, this was a dominant species in our forest, wiped out by this disease. Now, a couple things. This disease still exists, and there are some American chestnuts out there, some original American chestnuts that either were somewhere where the fungus didn't get there, or maybe they had a little bit of resistance. But here's what happens to almost all the chestnuts. If you go to the Appalachian Mountains, or even some areas of Ohio, there'll be lots and lots of little chestnut seedlings. But what tends to happen is they grow up to about the point of reproduction, and then they either die right then or soon thereafter. Because here's what's going on. The fungus is attacking the stem. That particular fungus is attacking the stem. It causes what we call a canker. It's damaging that tissue right around the stem. And here's what's happening. We'll look at this in a minute. We'll look at this in a second. The only way for plants to get food produced by the leaves, and the way that plants are different than us, fertilizer is good. We shouldn't call it plant food. It's wonderful. Nitrogen, phosphorus is wonderful. It isn't the same as the food produced by photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water, energy from a light source, the sun, chlorophyll, trapping that energy. Eventually you get a carbohydrate out of it. That food then is the energy source for the plant. The only way to get that energy source for that plant to the roots is through something called phloem. And the phloem is these tubes, basically, that take that food produced in the leaves down to the roots. Well, this canker fungus from the chestnut blight fungus is rotting that area of the phloem that's just inside the bark, just inside the bark. And just inside the phloem is the tissue that produced the phloem, and then the tissue that inside that produced the xylem that's taking water and minerals up to the top of the plant. So it's a race against time. These young seedlings can grow, and the fungus is kind of growing along with them. It's not getting all the way around the plant, so the plant's doing okay. And then an extremely stressful event occurs in the life of that chestnut tree. Reproduction. Reproduction is extremely costly to a plant in its energy use. And when you reproduce, you tend to have less capacity and less energy to defend yourself against this fungus. And so what tends to happen is that canker expands greatly during the period when reproduction occurs. The plant produces some seeds, and so we still have seedlings, but then it dies, and so we don't have the big chestnut trees anymore. So what are people doing? People are looking for some of those trees that survived, using them in breeding programs. They're also crossing them with Chinese chestnuts, and so the goal and what's happening is you get like 15/16 American chestnut and 1/16 Chinese chestnut that has the genes that allow that tree to resist, and so that's where we're getting these new chestnut hybrids. So how are we doing with ashes? Emerald ash borer was discovered in North America in 2002. And let me tell you, it's really tough to do tree breeding. You don't want to be a graduate student doing tree breeding. Might be a 60-year project. It's a tough game. Obviously, you got to define it in a little more limited sense, but it takes a long time to figure out, okay, what are the genes for resistance? How can we cross, and what do we cross it with exactly? Is it the Manchurian ash? Is it a different kind of Asian ash? So we're really just starting the process with tree breeding. I mean, we're starting to get to the point with good hybrid elms from Dutch elm disease, but that's been going on for, 90 years in North America. So we've got, 14 years with ashes? We're just starting to do that stuff with seeing if we can come up with a genetically resistant ash. Whereas one of the key points of doing that, the ash germplasm study at Worcester at OARDC. The germplasm study for ashes, which has all these hybrids, which has all the North American species, which has a bunch of the Asian species, that plot was dedicated on September 16th, 2011 at 5:29 p.m. What does that mean? Why did I say that? 2016, or 2011, September 16th, 2011 at 5:29 in the afternoon. 1 year to the day after the tornado knocked out 1,500 large trees at Sechrist Arboretum and caused huge damage. So they had the tornado. So 1 year to the date, they put in a new plot. So they're working on it, but believe me, we don't have it there yet. How many of you are worried about genetically modified organisms? GMOs, frankenfoods, all that stuff. Well, as you raise your hand, and it's going to be a lot of interesting, it's one of the most interesting things to discuss that there is. But here's why it's so appealing. The reason for the appeal is real. So you could spend a long, long time with traditional plant breeding trying to find a ash that's genetically resistant. You're going to have to cross it. It's like I say, finally after 100 years, we have some really nice chestnut hybrids now that come with that are 15/16 American chestnut and 1/16 Chinese chestnut that brings in the genes for resistance. It's really a bludgeoning of trying to have trees that it's a long process, that breeding. But what if you could find the gene, the genetic material, the DNA that confers resistance to the emerald ash borer? What if you could find that and then you spliced it into the genome of our North American ashes? And that's the same story over and over again. It's a very fascinating. There's obviously issues associated with it, but that's the whole of it. Is gosh, we could circumvent all this crossbreeding that we have to do that takes so long by just simply targeting it much more specifically. So we're not there, but we're starting that process. All right. All right. You asked for it. Oh, question in the back, yes?
I have tried to grow tomatoes in raised gardens, in planters, in pots, in the ground, and they always rot at the bottom.
All right, so she's growing tomatoes under all kinds of different situations. You've grown them in raised beds, in pots, and all these different kinds of situations. And you get the rotting at the bottom, which we call blossom end rot. Blackening of the tissue eventually gets soft. Blossom end rot is caused by calcium deficiency. And it's not really typically that there's not adequate calcium in the soil. Usually what the issue is that during periods of too dry of a conditions or too wet of a conditions, not enough calcium is taken up to that developing fruit. Calcium is absolutely critical. I mean, obviously the fruit is the ripened ovary at the base of the plant. So after you have the flower and you have fertilization and you have the seed developing, the zygote developing from the sperm and the egg, and then you have the seed developing, and then the ovary of the female portion of the flower ripens around the fertilized egg, the seeds, which is what a fruit is, a ripened ovary. That's why, botanically, we call tomato a fruit, because it's the ovary that ripened around the fertilized egg. So that's all happening. Calcium is really critical in those early processes, so it has to be there in a nice constant availability. So where we get blossom end rot is typically, not just that we don't have enough calcium in the soil or whatever, it's that we just don't have a steady amount of moisture available. Because if it's too wet, we always think, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. The problem with soils that are too wet for the tolerance of a particular plant is that if there's not enough oxygen in that soil, roots won't metabolize very well. And so if it's really wet, they just don't tend to take things up as much because they're not metabolizing as well as they need to be. If it's really dry, they're not taking things up because there's no soil water to take them up. So our problem with blossom end rot is that it happens when we have spikes in water availability rather than steady water availability. Ideally, you'd use trickle irrigation. Ideally is not the way any of us basically garden. How can you modify this? You want to have enough organic matter so that you'll modify that moisture. So people will do all kinds of things. They'll put down newspaper, they'll put down all kinds of things. What I would like to see, they'll put down straw. What I'd like to see people use is just more of an organic kind of mulch around their tomatoes, especially if you're having the problems that you're having. And then be very careful, especially if you're in pots, be very careful about how you're watering so that you get good steady availability of water. You'll notice that unless you're watering them yourself, like in a pot, some years will be really bad, some years will be not as bad. And it really tends to relate simply to whether you went through drought periods and then went through really wet periods. You know, if you had 2 or 3 days in a row of total rain, that means the soil's going to be wet. You know, if you had tomatoes out there right now, if this was July or if this was August when you're harvesting your tomatoes. So it's really a matter of water, steady water availability to the roots is what I think you're running into, because that, you know, it does sound like you have blossom end rot. Yeah.
If you have a plant or a tree that gets black spot disease, is it possible for them ever to get healthy again?
Okay, so when you say the black spot disease, what do you mean? Name a plant that you're talking about.
Well, we have maple trees, and it also got on our peony bushes, and took them over and almost totally killed them.
Okay, so she asked, what about this black spot disease that we're having? It got on our tomatoes, or it got on our Norway maples, or maybe silver maples. I'm guessing Norway maples, and also on our peony bushes. All right, so here is the rotten truth about the specificity of plant disease. Those are completely and totally different diseases caused by different pathogens. So tar spot of maple is caused by a fungal pathogen that is completely different from the cladosporium leaf blotch or measles disease that you get on your peony. And although it would be nice if it wasn't so complicated, that's just the way life is. We have black spot of rose, which is a serious disease if you're a rosarian. We have black spot of elm, which is not a big deal, comes in the fall. They're all different diseases. Those are all completely different diseases with different life cycles and have to be managed in different ways. So for example, with cladosporium leaf blotch that you're getting on your peonies, you could spray with fungicides multiple times every year, but the real way to control that is sanitation. The real problem with that is at the end of the year in a peony patch where you tended to get some cladosporium the year before, get all that debris out of there. You know, cut them back to almost the ground. I mean, they're not going to need that foliage in the winter, that dead foliage. Cut them back to almost the ground and then remove all that. You're trying to break the cycle of the fungus that causes cladosporium leaf disease. So you're trying to break the cycle that allows the fungus to survive to the next year. Now the spores that cause this disease are microscopic in size. So it's not like there's no chance that it's going to come from your neighbors. I mean, they're coming from Cheryl Coney's house. She's the one, and she's right next to you, and it's spread. No, the fact of the matter is that it can easily spread, but the more you can do good sanitation in your garden, and that disease is very simple. You just got to get good sanitation and get that cycle from getting worse and worse every year. The fungus is going to survive some, but knock this down by getting all that debris out before the next season starts. Tar spot of maple, completely different disease. There's a famous quote from Wayne Sinclair from Cornell. Tar spot of maple is one of the most spectacular and least important diseases of maple. And what he was getting at is it comes late in the season. Okay, so you lose leaves in August. You're going to lose leaves in September and October anyway. You know, so you could spray fungicides. Virtually nobody sprays those fungicides for that disease. The tree recovers and does fine year after year after year. But you could control it by preventing the fungus from getting into the plant by making multiple spray applications. However, it really doesn't tend to cause much damage. The leaves are going to drop anyway. Almost the vast majority of photosynthesis that those leaves have to be doing has already been done. That's why gypsy moth is so devastating, because it's an insect that feeds in May and June. That's when trees really have to make their hay. They have to really do their photosynthesis. They have to build their growth rings. They have to really gather all those things that allow them to have energy early in the season. If you get a late season thing like that, now, Wayne Sinclair was accused of being a pointy-headed intellectual because he was at Cornell. Has anybody ever been to Ithaca? Where is the campus compared to the town? But they're up higher, aren't they? Higher, better air movement. Down in Ithaca itself, where the Moosewood restaurant and all these wonderful things is, there's a lot less air movement. There are much poorer drying conditions. And so those Norway maples in the town really had a lot more tar spot than they did up there. And so they accused him. They said, well, you up there in your ivory tower, higher up, there's better, you don't have much tar spot. It's easy to say that it's not important. So there's all kinds of different ways of looking at it. For you, this may be a horrible disease. But if you were to try to control it, you would have to use, now one thing you can do is a sanitation thing. Again, clean up all those black spotted, tar spotted, but it's a total, and this is a really important point. Those are all different diseases caused by different organisms that have different life cycles, and to try to control them. And when I talk to Christmas tree growers, it's, if you have something where the infections are occurring in the spring versus infections occurring in the fall, your approach is totally different. I mean, it's just the way it is. Nature is interesting. All right? Yes?
When it comes to trying to grow blueberries in soil, and the soil has a pH of 7.5, is there anything that can be done with the soil?
I'll remove it to a depth of 3 feet and replace it all. So, we talked about these plant families that ending in ACE. Blueberries and rhododendrons are in the Ericaceae, the heath or the heather, the rhododendron family. They love low soil pH. They love acid soils. And they're just particularly sensitive to the amount of iron in the soil and manganese. And every plant needs iron, every plant needs manganese. The fact is we have enough iron and manganese in virtually every soil in the state of Ohio. The issue is, at a high soil pH, the iron and manganese gets tied up by other minerals in the soil. It's just a straight chemical reaction. At the lower soil pHs, they don't get tied up. So when we have low soil pHs, if you have a 6 or a 6.5, which we have over in Akron, which you have in Philadelphia. I mean, if one of the things I always used to say is, I said, quite frankly, because I lived in Akron at the time, I said, or near Akron, I still live in Doylestown, where I live. I said, the people in Dayton are the lousiest rhododendron gardeners you've ever seen. And Columbus are a little better. Akron, they're getting really pretty good. Philadelphia, they're fabulous. They simply had soil more suited for that plant. So right plant, right location. Now, Peter Smithers was a horticulturalist who said, and I always thought this was a good saying, he said, I consider every plant hardy until I have killed it myself. So the fact is, although Extension is giving out the best management practices, and here's what we would recommend, don't try to grow blueberries in pH of 7.5, you're just going to be fighting it to the end of time. It doesn't really work to deal with it. You get to do it anyway. I mean, short of planting illegal plants, you get to plant whatever you want and, see what happens. So when people try to deal with it, they really oftentimes do actually replace the soil to a depth of several feet with more acid soil. And it works a little better to do that for blueberries than it does a tree like a pin oak that's also acid loving, because eventually that pin oak is going to take up a lot of soil. You're going to have to replace a half acre or something. The other approaches are, for example, with pin oaks, and you can't do this with blueberries because they have too thin of a stem, people would mainline iron into the tree. They would have these metacaps where they'd actually inject this iron substance, and they'd say, well, the soil doesn't work for me, I'll just bypass the soil, I'll inject it right into the tree. And so, but you got to keep damaging the plant. You can't do it for blueberries. There are what are called acidifying fertilizers, but it's a tough, tough game. For example, for pin oaks in the Chicago area, they used to dump tankerfuls of sulfuric acid around these big, giant root zones of pin oaks. Because, sulfuric acid, I mean, you got to get, they're trying to lower the soil pH with sulfur. And, so that, even that was tough, but, you could maybe do it and you got to do it, but, you can't be dumping tankers. So you get acidifying fertilizers, you can try muric acid, you can try spraying iron straight on the plant. For example, if the Memorial Tournament in Columbus this year, if there's been something that makes the plant, the turf grass look kind of off color, and the tournament's coming up and the TV cameras are there, they'll spray iron to get it right into the leaves because iron is important in photosynthesis, and so they just want to green it up real quickly. But if you're getting my point here, it's all these things are just trying to overcome the big, giant deficit you started with. So, it's tough. If your pH is 7.5, it's going to be a hard, hard game for you. Although, you could grow some blueberries with removing that soil and putting some new soil in there. And, there'll be people who say, well, I did it, and blah, blah, blah. But it's just hard. It's much harder to do because there's a tremendous balancing act that the soil does. And we can raise soil pH. It's not that easy, but you can raise soil pH to a higher pH for plants that do well for that, like turf grass. That's why they lime turf grass. They're trying to raise soil pH in an area like Akron. So liming will do that. That's still hard, but lowering soil pH, for example, with sulfur or acidifying fertilizers, very, very difficult. Chelated iron is one aspect. Chelated meaning it's resistant to that getting bound to other materials. Still very tough. So it's a tough game if you have an acid-loving plant and you have alkaline soil. But get above 6.5 or something like that. Blueberries are actually for 4.5, 5, 5.5. Now it's hard to get that. But we got lots of 6s over our way and kind of moving up into northeast and going that way. All right? Yes?
Skunks in my lawn.
What?
Skunks
in your lawn? Why are there skunks in her lawn?
Everywhere this year.
So I'm sorry. So what else were you going to say? There are skunks in your yard and?
And they're big, little.
Yes.
It's like the lawn has been bombed.
So why are they there?
Because of the grubs.
So they're eating grubs.
So. Milky spore or grub eggs.
So milky spore doesn't work.
Thank you.
Milky spore is a nice idea. Let's cause a disease of the grub worms and get rid of them. And it's a great idea. We all want those biological controls. Let's tap into a natural way that certain organisms are controlled. And so it's a great, hey, that sounds great. It's just that it's virtually never been successful. So, you might get some, you'll get some, oftentimes, for a while there, the problem was that the product really didn't have much active spores of that bacterium that would control the grubs. So then we improved all that. But it just doesn't provide anywhere near the level of control that you want. And the level of control you want is that there's not enough grubs to have those skunks in the yard. So you're probably looking at either dealing with the skunks as you have to deal with them, getting animals like dogs to deal with them, which is not very much fun anyway. Bring in some porcupines that'll get the skunks, but maybe the skunks will get some of the porcupines. And you're going to have a problem. This is, everybody, I don't want to use grub egg. I don't want to use a product to control grub worms. I don't want to use insecticides. I'd rather not. And it's fine. Of course, that's a great option. But you're going to probably have your skunks if you have lots of grubs. It's just a problem. Some people can tolerate grubs, or some people can tolerate grubs and skunks, but some people can't. And the thing I'd point out about pesticides, it's very easy to hate other people's pesticides. It's easy. We shouldn't have any pesticides until you have roaches. Or how about termites? Or skunks. It's just, it's a difficult decision that everybody makes and thinks about relative to costs and benefits. So we have some reasonably safe, nothing is really totally safe, reasonably safe insecticides to control this, or you just deal with it. How did I control dandelions in my yard? A weed is an unwanted plant. I looked out one morning and said, look at those lovely orange flowers. The weed no longer existed. It was no longer unwanted. I controlled it completely with my strong mental acuity. But I don't have anything against people deciding to do it a different way. That's one thing about master gardeners. We're not there to tell you, here's what you got to do because this is what I believe. You know, we try to keep people information that they want to have, and if they want to use herbicide to control, and you control what? Mothballs to control skunks. Just depends on how hungry they are, how many there are, how much other food is available. I'm going to reserve, I know I'm supposed to stop it in 10 minutes. I'm going to reserve the last 5 minutes for my PowerPoint because I just want to at least have a little fun. But you know, what?
You have a question over
Yes,
there?
yes. Well, and she was there too. Over here, aha, madam.
This might be a two-part question, but I heard that we're going to get our cicadas this year.
17-year cicadas. I'm trying to figure out exactly how far up they're going to be. The brood. Well, yeah. So okay, go ahead.
And what plant or what will it affect garden-wise?
Okay, the cicadas are, okay, so the question was, I hear we're going to get the 17-year cicadas this year, and what plants will affect garden-wise. Okay, two parts to this. First of all, we have cicadas every year, and they're called dog day cicadas, and so we hear that whirring every year. Oh, that, I mean, you're correct. There's something I had said that I would do, because it's so cool. Just a moment. This, I recorded this on Tuesday. Let's see if I can get it without, I mean, this has nothing to do with what you said. But I must do this. I hope this works. If it doesn't work, it's going to be wasting a minute for nothing. Oh, I know how to get it there. My own post. Oh, here it is. Come on. Oh, it's not working. Yes, it was. I know. I went to Johnson Woods. It was like this. The peepers are going crazy. So anyway, all right. So every year we hear a whirring, and late in the summer, the dog day cicadas. You tend to hear them in July and August. Peepers are little tiny frogs, by the way. You know what I didn't know how small they were. I never see them.
Can't hear you.
I was reading about the peepers the other day that are out now, and just cacophonous in the woods and wetlands. And a peeper will fit on a dime easily. So they're really tiny little things that have been in the muck of the wetlands and stuff. Johnson Woods is a great place to see them. Okay, so it was just I wanted to have sound of them. All right, so we have this whirring from the dog day cicadas, and every once in a while in different areas of the state, we'll have the 17-year cicadas, and it's really an incredible phenomenon. Now, first of all, I don't know if they're scheduled to be here this year. I just don't know. I mean, somebody could figure that out. So they're going to be here. So here's what they do. It's an unbelievable thing. They literally live underground for 17 years, and every 17 years they come out. I mean, there's some broods that are at 13 years, and there's some broods that come out every 17 years. But it's really a truly unusual kind of periodical thing. So they're just kind of hanging out, kind of gradually munching on roots, and they're not doing much underground. They're not causing hardly any damage, but there's really, as you know if you've lived through these, there's millions of them that come out. And so they come out, and I guess I would say that they do very little true damage to any of our plants, except if you're a nurseryman. So what they do is, the problem with cicadas, 17-year cicadas, is that they make these little chip cocoons. I have a nice picture of them, but you know, it's on another PowerPoint. They make these nice little chip cocoons where they lay their eggs in twigs. The adult cicadas don't really, they feed on nectar and little on leaves, no big deal. Don't damage plants at all, but they make these little chip cocoons. And so typically what you're going to end up seeing is, is like you're in a woodland or area or in a nursery, and there'll be thousands of shoots about this long. You know, they want a certain size of twig. And so you have a shoot like that these chip cocoons are laid in. They're damaging the tissue just under the bark, which is the phloem, and the vascular cambium that produces phloem to the outside, xylem to the inside. So that twig dies. And so you see this shoot dying back on thousands and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of these. But that doesn't matter to most of us in terms of the health of the plant. You just kind of say, oh, how interesting we have them here this year, because they're mostly on woody plants. and they don't kill the woody plants. Now again, if you're a nurseryman and your ability to beat out the nurseryman next to you is producing a plant to a certain size in a year less, then that's a bigger deal for you. Let's say that you have a bunch of nurserymen that are in an area that isn't affected this year, and so they have the chance to get better growth than you did. But I wouldn't worry about it on gardening plants at all. Rarely do we see it be a significant issue on herbaceous plants, and on woody plants, it's just going to mean you're going to lose a little bit of the growth, and you're going to look at it and say the world is coming to an end, but it's typically not a big deal in terms of overall plant health. So we have 5 minutes, and I just have to indicate that it's just terrible how you have forbidden me and stopped me from doing my PowerPoint. I get paid by Ohio State University by the number of PowerPoint images that I show, and you have ruined my monthly income. No, I know sometimes, it's not my question, I wish you do, but, I just like to, I would never have answered. Obviously the questions that were asked here were by people that really wanted the answer. I never would have answered a single one with what I intended to do today. So hopefully in answering them, I got across some of my ideas about kind of how plant health works and how we look at the issue of what's wrong with my plant. You've actually, it's kind of in a way, wasn't quite sure on where we were 17 years cicadas year, but I kind of answered most of these questions. I only know 5 things, and so thankfully there was only 5 questions. This would be the dream if you were on a quiz show and they just happened to answer the 5 things that you know. But real quickly, let's just look at this. So we are OH. Now look at how smart the trees are in Ohio and how much we've trained our students here. OHIO, it's incredible. In Ohio, we're not messing around. You think there's anything like that up in Michigan? I don't think so. It may be green for the Spartans, but they're, first of all, so we're Buckeyes. But look at this. This is a horse chestnut. They don't notice the 7 leaflets. But look how beautiful this is. This is coming up. This is coming up in a few weeks. Look at the Ohio bucket. This is not a flyer for the marijuana initiative. This is the Ohio buckeye, the Esculus glabra. Look at that. Look at how beautiful it is. The flowers are going to come there. There's flowers. Look at the buckeyes rising, opening. Just don't miss this stuff. This stuff is all about to happen. For example, these buckeyes down in southeast Ohio, 2 or 3 weeks away. It's unbelievable. Cornelian cherry dogwood blooming today at Sechrist Arboretum in Worcester. The spring is really ahead of itself this year. You're really going to see, I predict that 1 week from today, 9 days from today, I predict that star magnolias will start coming out. Based on what we're looking at in terms of temperatures, how much degree days it takes for those blossoms to come out, we're way ahead of the game. Hey, get the Buckeye Yard and Garden line. This is one of our best ways of extension getting information out. It used to be that every Tuesday we would get together, talk about stuff, all the people from around the state, and we'd say, we're going to put these stories in, and it would come out on Thursday. This year will be the first year we've kind of turned it over to a blog. It's all been electronic since 1992. This year we're putting them, it's stupid that we waited so long, but it'll go the day that we think of it and write it. So it'll be all year long, but it'll start here in a couple of weeks, and it's just a good little thing available. It'll be available forever starting this year. And it just talks about all this stuff. The army worms are marching on Richland County. Evacuate, those kinds of immediate things. So we put together beagle.osu.edu. Just go to beagle.osu.edu. It's a beautiful thing. It's free. We do ask for donations because it costs us to do it. You know how that is. But it's free. We're going to skip past this. So we're going to talk about question mark and mysterious a little later. Where do we want to go? Okay, one story. Do I have a 4-minute story in me? This is the most important thing I could possibly talk to you. Well, you want to do roots or stems?
Roots.
Yeah. All right. So a tree's leaves may be ever so good, so may its bark, and so may its wood. But unless you put the right thing to its root, it never will show much flower fruit. The roots are the most important part. You're trying to grow those blueberries. It's going to be about roots. All right, in an average cup of healthy forest soil, there are Now, I didn't say in Richland County or in an acre. I said in a cup that you could hold in your hand. So this is obviously, I'm lying. But Sarita Fry is also lying. It's true, 200 billion bacteria. How ridiculous is that? 60 miles of fungal hyphae, and then you're saying, well, he is lying. 60 miles of something in my hand. But there are these microscopic, now there are fungi that cause diseases, bacteria that cause disease, but there's all these other organisms that are in there. And we want to encourage a robust portfolio of these organisms in the soil. We really do. So here's the soil. We start with a soil here that has what we call micropore spaces, small spaces. And we have mineral and organic matter in there. But now let's add a good healthy soil, for example, in composted material, and soil to which we've added a lot of composted material. A lot of organic matter, not organic fertilizers, not organic insecticides or pesticides, organic matter. So we add that, and there are all these squirmies, we'll call them, or microbial glue that is gluing stuff together. And that microbial glue results in soil aggregates or soil beds. This is the most important thing that you can do to your soil. You're stuck with your sand, silt, and clay. Whatever it is, whatever percentage. You want sand, you want clay, you want silt, you want it all. A loam, a really good loam, has them all, but you want them in nice proportion. You're not going to really change that very easily unless you just replace it. But you can change soil structure. Texture you're not going to change. Structure you can change. And so you want to encourage lots of microbial glue, because what happens with it is that the soil aggregates. Because there's this microbial glue, this clumping together, all this microorganism life, these turn into, and it's what, when it's just kind of, oh, look at that, they're just crumbling in my hand, my soil. My neighbor's soil is, turned into a clay pot. Now this will take you 50 or 60 years. By adding organic matter, but they form into aggregates, and look what that means. You have the micropores, just like within the soil that didn't have a lot of organic matter, but you have then macropores, large pore spaces between the soil beds. You have more room for oxygen, which the roots need to metabolize, in which a lot of microbes that we don't like the water mold organisms, they like it low oxygen. So we want to have high oxygen for the roots to metabolize, low oxygen for the water mold organisms. So soil aggregates are made up of loosely attached soil particles stuck together by microbial glue, the microorganism connection. Soil aggregates enhance soil structure by producing macropores. Increasing microorganisms increases microbial glue, increases soil aggregate. I'm going over and over this because it's crucial. Increases macropores and improves soil structure. You can improve soil structure. This will be our last slide because it's time for me to go. Well, it's time for you to get rid of me. So organic matters. If you add organic matter, and the right kind of organic matter, you want to add sawdust. You want completely decomposed stuff. You add sawdust to the soil, it'll be fine years later, but in the meantime, all the microorganisms that are breaking down the sawdust will use the nitrogen that your roots need to take up in the xylem to help produce amino acids in the plant. So you want organic matter that's composted. And I have an example of how that works, but it's too late. Because you kept me from my appointed ground. So you add organic matter, which increases biological activity and diversity, helps reduce soil-borne diseases. It's true, it really does. We have a research study to show it that I was going to do, but we can't do it. Decomposition increases. Harmful substances are detoxified, some of them. Humus and other growth-promoting substances. Nutrients are released. Aggregation is increased. Pore structure is improved. Improved silt and water storage. Healthier plants. It's not a miracle, but this is the real thing that you can do. Don't buy a bunch of soil activators. Oh, I'll throw some of these bacteria in here and this will activate things. Or mycorrhizal fungi and all these things. These are all things that, frankly, are chicken soup for the soil. They aren't going to be effective. Adding organic matter is your only shot at really changing things. And I'm done.